심화 과정으로 들어가 볼 텐데요. 이번 순서는 대담입니다. 메타버스 대담에 함께 하실 존 레이더프 BW 대표는 메타버스를 이끄는 30인 중에 한 명으로 꼽히는 분인데요. 아마 메타버스에 관심 있는 분들은 레이더프의 미디엄 블로그 한 번씩 보셨을 겁니다. 한국에는 게이미피케이션과 소셜 게임이라는 책이 번역되어 있기도 한데요. 언리얼 엔진 기반의 소셜 게임 플랫폼 비머블의 창업자이자 대표를 맡고 있습니다. 레이도프 대표와 함께 대담을 진행할 알렉스 리 테크 IPM 대표는 뉴욕주 변호사면서 뉴미디어 전략 컨설팅을 하고 있는데요. 테크 IPM은 미국 보스턴에 본사를 둔 인공지능과 블록체인 관련 특허를 하고 있는 리서치 컨설팅 회사입니다. 오늘 대담은 알렉스 리와 존 레이도프 대표가 각각 짧은 발표를 하고 이 두 분이 서로 질의응답을 나누는 순서로 진행할 텐데요. 역시 미국과의 시차 문제 등으로 사전 녹화된 영상이 보내지는 점 양해 부탁드립니다. 자, 지금 바로 만나볼까요?
Thank you for inviting us for this fascinating conference. And then we are going to start our session right now. Okay, hi everyone. We would like to join in person, but because of COVID-19, we cannot join in person. So, but fortunately, we can do it in remote. Actually, this is a metaverse environment, right? Okay, so briefly, we are going to introduce ourselves. So I'm Alex Giri, and then I'm a CEO of Tech IPM, and then Boston-based consulting and tech incubation company. And then especially recently, we focus on metaverse technology innovation. And then also, I may be the John. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Jon Radoff. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've run a number of companies that have been involved in the metaverse. I like to say sometimes that I've been in the metaverse ever since I was a kid. My first metaverse was Dungeons and Dragons. So we did that. I did coding. I've run companies both in video games, run a couple different video game studios. I started a software company called ePrize that built content creation software for people to publish on the web. I started an advertising network. Now I'm running a company called Beamable, which is in the business of creating live server infrastructure for game companies. And in addition to that, I have a blog called Building the Metaverse. And the reason why I think about this, and I think we'll get into this more deeply in the conversation, is I see the game technology stack, which has 3D graphics on the top and these world server environments on the back end for persistence and identity and whatnot. That combination is really what's going to power all these things that we're talking about in the metaverse.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start my presentation first. Okay, so this is my summary of my insight regarding the present and the future of metaverse. So basically, I'm 30 years experience in high-tech area, especially I'm a specialist in technology innovation. So basically, to my understanding, metaverse is a collection of a fully connected, interoperable, and the physically augmented digital world. So here is the difference between we have seen the virtual reality or virtual stuff for a long time, but the traditional virtual reality and difference between this and this metaverse is this is physically augmented digital world. So I'm going to explain later. And it should be physically persistent that are converted with a virtually augmented physical world. This is we all know about augmented reality is a virtually augmented physical world in which people and digital representation of people, especially that we call avatar or the digital people, can fully interact with one another, and digital object environment, including digital twins, will with the full reality. So here is a key term is augmentation and reality. This is the key terms that we have in mind. So that metaverse is a converged world of augmented physical world and virtual world that is hyper decentralized, hyper connected and hyper visualized and hyper interactive and hyper reality enabled. So the metaverse can create economic value without space-time resource limitation. This is a very important meaning of this metaverse. Okay, so I will explain one by one what is the present and the future of metaverse. So I'm going to start from the very familiar to everyone. Here is the one metaverse is, we know about the Roblox. This is a game platform. So what is the difference between this metaverse game platform and the previous game is here. Me and you are the dear person can join through your digital me and digital you as a avatar. And then you can join this virtual world and then you can play your game with your other humans. And then also you can change all the characteristics of this virtual environment. And then also you can interact with every aspect of this virtual environment. So the difference is that this virtual space is augmented by the real space because of these real human beings are integrated to this virtual space. And then you can make exactly the same digital representation of your real object process. They call digital twins. And then here is the one actually that you can have a digital twin of your automobiles, or you can have like a digital twin of your office space, where you can have like a digital twin of your whole cities. We call smart cities. So this was also already exist. And then what is different between traditional digital twins and the metaverse digital twin is here is the same thing, that the real entities, like real human beings or some other real entities are joined together. So this is the one very important thing, is that the metaverse bring you that in the physical space, you have a space-time resource limitations, but in the metaverse space, in the virtual space, you don't have any that kind of limitations. So you can extend whole thing that you cannot possible in the traditional physical space and bring this, the power of the unlimited power of this virtual space can join. So they augment the both space. So they can create a lot values that actually it was not possible before without this metaverse. And then for this metaverse can be realized, for example, that you know about the like Ready Player One movies, and then everybody talk about how we can actually implement, actually realize that kind of Ready Player One kind of the metaverse. Then we need some kind of technology innovation. So for example, we need like reality technology innovation, like wearable devices and augmented reality or like extended reality devices. And then also you need like a sensing device. So you need to like sense your sense. And then also you need AI technology developed for representing humans. And so they can like make digital humans exactly following your knowledge and your emotion. And also we need like a digital twin technology. They will talk about this as a metaverse. Yes, it's part of a metaverse, but it's not all. So in the future, this will all combine. And then it's a grand scale metaverse will coming out. And then they will bring out huge potential and then provide a lot of value actually was not possible in the without metaverse. So it's really very exciting about this in the future of the metaverse. And then you can see that the presently the global company like for example Facebook, they Mark Zuckerberg talk about that. He wants that in 5 years that the metaverse device will be used by everyone like a smartphone of today. And then, but what he talk about is only talk about some space of this. And then, for example, Roblox and others talk about extending their game with integrate with the real Earth, but this is a part of it. And then also someone like Nissan talk about only the automobile application, and then Microsoft talk about some metaverse architecture, but nobody actually talk about this whole scope of this metaverse potential. So I think that it'll be a good opportunity, especially in South Korea, have a very strong IT and then telecom infrastructure, and then highly educated and knowledgeable people like engineers and developers. And then it'll be a good opportunity that who knows, know about this potential, and then maybe in the future, like combined with the Apple, Google, Microsoft type company will be coming out from South Korea. I hope that will come. Okay, so it's now your turn. John, why don't you talk about your presentation?
Sure. Let me maybe just add some thoughts to what you were just talking about, though, because I think there are some key themes there that are really interesting and I think helpful for people to keep in their mind. So one is just the idea that the metaverse is not just a place that we go into, for example, like virtual reality or on our computer screen. The metaverse is going to be all around us. It's going to be overlaid over the entire world. And sometimes we'll go into a virtual world space that is inside something or inside VR. But really, the exciting part about this is that continuum with the entire world. So when we go out into the world, we'll be able to recognize objects, receive data, recognize people. So I think that's just one really important point for everybody to keep in mind, which is this idea of the metaverse just constantly surrounding us. The second piece of this is the idea that you are really embedded in the environment, meaning you yourself are there, which is different than the experience of using the internet right now, unless you're playing like a game or something, right? When you go to a website, you're looking at the information, but you're not present with that information. You're not inside that world. So a big part of this idea or the notion of the metaverse is that we're present within it. We are in a space, we are identifiable within it, and we're relating to other people that are operating in that space as well. A third piece that I think you talked about, which is very, very important, is the role of creativity within the metaverse. So I'll talk, I think we'll get into this a little bit later when we drill a little bit deeper, but a big part of this is that the tools that allow you to create content, whether that's a 3D object, a story, or even an entire world within this, it's getting far easier to do that, which means we're going to see a significant increase in the number of people who are creating all manner of experiences, worlds, content in this space. So we're going to have a lot more creativity going on. At the opposite extreme, there's a lot of hard science and technology to be solved. Artificial intelligence, advanced semiconductors, batteries have to get smaller. So all of these things are going to be required to really deliver on some of the metaverse vision that you were talking about. But you know, the cool thing about all of this is that it actually exists right now as well. So that's I think maybe the last thing I just want to react to in some of your discussion, which is the metaverse is here today. It's not as if we've got to wait 5 or 10 years for it to all to arrive for us. The metaverse is already here. I think you said it first when we were in this, like we're in the metaverse now doing this conference. So this is the metaverse right this very moment. Is it going to get more advanced? Yes, it's going to have more and more immersive technology. The graphics fidelity will get better. The things that AI enables is going to get better and better. We're going to have more and more types of experiences. Games are going to get more advanced. So everything's going to get more advanced and better over time, but the metaverse is here now. So we're already building this reality with each other. So I have a little bit of content that I can share from a slide deck, just to give you a few of the ways that I think of the structure of the metaverse, what it is, where we're going, and some of the trends that really define it. So I think of it as a number of different layers, and here's how you can think of the structure of the metaverse and the pieces that all go together in this. And we talked about creators. Well, you need the tools that enable creators to actually make stuff. So you mentioned some of the companies, certainly big companies like Microsoft are going to play a role within that, but also Unity and Unreal doing the 3D technology, companies like mine that are building some of the server technology. So everybody that's enabling creators to make things is this creator economy layer. Beneath that, you've got spatial computing, right? So it used to be that if you wanted to do 3D graphics on a computer, it was almost entirely a collection of hacks, basically, shader graphs and things like that. Games that do 3D graphics, they look 3D, but it's really a lot of mathematical tricks, very clever mathematical tricks on top of a GPU. Well, we're going to continue to do that, but increasingly it will use things such as real-time ray tracing, right? We'll use the actual physics of light to render an environment. But the spatial computing technology is everything that enables that through software. So that's the actual VR, AR, XR, and so forth. Then there's the idea of decentralization. That I don't think is what's going to happen. It's not going to be one company that rules the entire metaverse. That would be like saying there's one company that rules the entire internet. So when I talk about decentralization, it includes things such as the open source movement, open platforms that allow anybody to create software within it, as well as a return to more of the many pieces loosely joined philosophy of the internet that we originally had, where pieces work together instead of all within one walled garden. Below that, you've got the human interfaces. So now we're getting into hardware. So this includes your mobile device, your computer, VR. I'm a big believer in headsets, but the headset has to go from being this really heavy, clunky object on my head down to like Ray-Ban glasses. We're already seeing that out of companies like Facebook and Snap. And then ultimately, infrastructure, semiconductors, batteries, the networks, 5G, 6G, the materials science, something that Korea has always been super strong in too. Like Samsung is one of the world leaders in this. So that's a big enabler of this. So this is the industrial structure of the metaverse. There's many, many companies that do this. I actually even have an updated version of this slide on my blog, my Building the Metaverse blog. I have like 200 companies now. Every week, someone gives me another 5, 6 companies that are building something important. But you can see just how many companies and projects there are working on this all over the world. What the metaverse really is, it's this place for experiences and real-time activity driven by creators and a decentralized economy. But this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry when you look at it. It's pretty significant, and it'll affect every aspect of our lives.
Thank you, John. Could you out of screen mode?
Yes. Hold on.
Okay, John. First, I would like to ask you, what is the origin of the metaverse?
Yeah. So we could look at it a few different ways. One is just sort of like where the word came from and what that has meant over time. We could look at it in terms of what are some of the things that came before technologically that enabled it. So the word metaverse was coined by Neil Stephenson. He's a science fiction author. He wrote this book called Snow Crash. And his view of it was that eventually the internet would be like a 3D space you'd go into. And that's how it began. You can then kind of fast forward to like recent history where we had Ready Player One, which you mentioned earlier. They had a metaverse as well. They didn't call it the metaverse, but they called it the Oasis. And I think a lot of why we're talking about the metaverse right now actually you could sort of thank that movie for it, because everybody saw people going into virtual reality and spending all this time there. And it captured people's imaginations. They wanted to do that. You know, the word meta, it means beyond, between. So it's like the universe beyond. In computer science, sometimes meta also means like something that's self-referential. So you have like data about data, for example, is metadata, right? So those are kind of where the words come from. I actually think both apply here, because part of the metaverse is this next plane of existence, this universe beyond our own, but also it's about the imagination happening in our minds, in our space, and the creativity that we're laying out there. And it's the fact that that creativity is going to keep coming back upon itself. It's the creativity referring to itself and all the other creators in the world participating in this. So that's what I think of it. Now, all along though, games, like I think if you really look at what has driven what we're now thinking of as the metaverse, one theme is the internet, of course, and it's the next generation of the internet, but all this several decades of building games and putting people into virtual worlds and creating experiences, and also just provoking emotion and storytelling through games, all of that is really informing the metaverse, and that's part of the origin of the metaverse.
Thank you. Okay, so my second question is, what are the main trends that have enabled the metaverse?
Yeah, so when I was giving my presentation earlier, I talked about the kinds of industrial layers that were put together for it, but all around that, I think there's a whole bunch of trends that drive it, and some of them are social and some of them are technological. So I want to talk about, you know, the main ones. I've actually identified 9 of them. So I'll try to kind of briefly touch on at least each of them. The social trend that's really important is just the idea that now we've got a couple of generations of people in the world who have grown up really thinking about their digital identity being just as important, if not even more important than their physical identity. So people express themselves online, they become accustomed to virtual goods, they're in esports teams, they meet people online and form relationships. That wasn't the case decades ago, but now people have become increasingly accustomed to it such that it's second nature. So if we didn't have that social priming out there in society, then we might not be ready for the metaverse. But part of why we're ready for it now is not just a technology issue, it's really preparing society to be part of it, which we now have. This concept that I call virtual mainstreaming, the idea that the virtual world has become mainstream. Another couple of big trends that I think are important to think about is the big platforms are not going away anytime soon, right? So as much as there will be a metaverse, there will still be, I think for quite some time, a Facebook, a Roblox, an Apple, et cetera. Like all these companies that have control over audiences and can be gatekeepers are going to continue to be there. But at the same time, the other trend that goes alongside of that is just the challenge by open platforms. So there are actually technologies, WASM, for example, lets you deliver an application to a web browser similarly to how you would deliver an app to a phone, or WebXR lets you deliver VR, AR, XR kind of experiences through a web browser. So we have the technologies to provide in open standards-based way for both interoperability and delivering applications. What will happen though is the companies that own these big platforms, they're really heavily motivated to just make it very, very easy to create in those platforms. That's their competitive advantage. The advantage of not being in their platforms is the economics can be a lot better. There can be a lot more cooperation, but it's always harder to do that. So we'll have to watch those trends and see how it unfolds, but I think both will be happening in parallel. All right, you touched on machine intelligence, AI, like that's really, really important to the metaverse for a whole wide range of reasons. One is you're going to go into the metaverse and there will be virtual beings in there. You'll interact with characters. It could be a character in a game. It could be a customer service person, right? You can imagine all of the different things that will interact with you that are driven by intelligence and natural language processing and whatnot. In addition to that, though, AI is so central to all of the interfaces. So gesture recognition, speech recognition, facial recognition, all of these technologies that let you actually interact in a more human way with the technology. Because we're not going to want to type everything, right? We want to actually just be in this environment like we work in real life. But that's very, very hard, right? So AI needs to get better, faster, and so forth. And then another aspect of AI is it's a creative partner as well, right? So there's characters that might interact with you. There's the AI that's going to help on the interface, but all this creativity where we're talking about, well, some of it is going to be augmented by computer technology helping you. You already see, for example, on GitHub, they've got like pair programming kind of technology where you can explain what you want a piece of code to do, and it will create a lot of the code. That's an example. You're going to see more of that in not only code, but artwork, storytelling, all of these things. You've got low-code platforms is another big trend. So it's really, really important to expand the economic opportunities and expand the number of people who can actually participate in the metaverse, which means not everyone should have to be a coder to participate in this. We want to have artists come in. We want storytellers to come in. Anyone in any job should be able to participate in this without necessarily being a coder. So no code and low code platforms are going to be very important. Simulating reality, another huge trend. Like you can really look at what NVIDIA is doing, for example, in this area. They have a platform called the Omniverse where they can actually put architects and interior designers and mechanical engineers all in one space. And then you can design whole buildings. In fact, you could design whole cities. And you mentioned digital twins. Well, you'll be able to import the digital twins into a real-time model of a building or a whole space or a neighborhood. Blockchain, I think, is just another really important trend that cannot be ignored, not just because of the cryptocurrencies that it's enabling, but smart contracts is really the interesting technology here, because the internet, when it was made, was about opening up the ability to exchange information between any nodes on the network. And we've built an entire internet around information exchange. But blockchain through smart contracts allows for value exchange that's much more powerful and much more distributed than what's enabled through current like centralized controls. So these are the big trends that you can really see evolving over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. Like this is a long-term project to build all this stuff.
Yeah, fascinating. Yes, indeed. Yeah, actually, it have some thing that I have in my remember. Actually, that I did my PhD in astrophysics. Actually, I studied the origin of the universe about 30 years ago. And I tried to find out what the universe, and then my expertise actually to try to explain complex system in a simpler way. And I found that the metaverse is, to me, is another universe I'm going to explore, because huge potential. And then, like in Star Trek, the place that we never go, right? And then I want to explore, like using the metaverse, like a Star Trek spaceship to explore it, and then find out the complex potential to make it easier to people can understand and people can use. What sort of things will people be doing in the metaverse?
Sure. So what are the experiences? Well, games, of course. Probably don't have to say too much about games, but games are going to get bigger. They're going to have more people in them. There's going to be more complexity, more things that you can make. I think we'll see an evolution within games where games themselves have their own creator economy. So when we talk about the creator economy, sometimes we're talking about making the games or making content that is interoperable across games. But in individual games, you'll even be encouraging people to make modifications to create their own buildings, their own landscapes in the game world, right? So games. Then I think you can go out from there to all the things that are like game adjacent, such as social experiences, right? So you already have things like, VR chat, for example, is an example of that. But a lot of what people are looking for in the metaverse is just human connection. You talked about exploring space through astrophysics. There will be digital twins of stars pulling in the data from all kinds of telescopes all over the world. Yeah. But the other space that I think is really interesting to think about is the inner space, our connection with other people and storytelling, emotion. Like that's actually still very unexplored. Like social networks are kind of still a little superficial. I share my pictures of my kids or something with my family, and that's fun, but there's a whole deeper connection with other people that we'll be able to form in the metaverse as well. And that includes being able to express ourselves, explore different forms of how we identify ourselves within virtual environments. You can go beyond that to some of the natural applications that come out of it, like work collaboration, right? So if we can do social collaboration and exploring what's inside ourselves and in other people, well, we can work as teams within the metaverse, and we can dematerialize space so that it's far less important to actually be physically present, right? And then you can extend beyond that. Like if we can do workforce collaboration in the metaverse, why wouldn't I just travel in the metaverse, right? So already there's companies like Matterport, for example, are scanning the insides of buildings as well as famous heritage sites. Like they went to Egypt and they recorded the inside of tombs. So you can do like a virtual tour of a tomb. Now that's a very, very, early version of this, but where that's going to go next is I'll actually explore the actual space, maybe with a telepresence drone or something, and all my friends will do it from their headsets, and we'll actually go and explore a space in real time, and it's actually in the space. We're just not physically there, right? So those are a few things. There's fitness applications. I think that's a huge one because going to a gym is kind of a pain when you could just be doing all this stuff from home in the same way you travel to stuff. Think of all the things you travel to, right? Gyms, shopping malls, and then just take the city you live in. Like your entire city will be part of the metaverse, right? That's the whole idea of smart cities. So augmenting it with traffic information and data about history and what you can buy in the area, and maybe even incorporating AI so that it's not just pushing information to you, but you're pulling information, you're recognizing things in your environment and using that to integrate all kinds of information together into your experience to help you make decisions about what you want to do, or spot something that's rare, like a rare plant or animal when you're hiking somewhere. So, that I think the short of it is the metaverse is going to impact virtually every aspect of our lives: work, social relationships, entertainment. It's going to impact everything.
I have an additional comment because I'm also the New York State attorney. I attending the Boston, Suffolk University, and I passed the lawyer's exam. But actually, I'm a patent attorney, I'm a technology attorney. But as an attorney, actually, for example, to use blockchain in the metaverse is huge potential, NFT, but regulation is they block whatever you try to do innovation, right? And then when I attended my law school, actually, the professor taught us that law should be changed depending on the society and the innovation, right? So the lawyer's law is not regulate, right? They should be follow the society and innovation, right? I think that to metaverse really have a create value, actually the regulation should also be deregulated. And then it should be like a more different laws should be applied. And then the regulators and lawyers should know about this, right? So this is a very important aspect, especially in South Korea. This blockchain is now hard time because of regulation. And then I heard about even you launching NFT in South Korea is very difficult because of regulation. Yeah. So law and regulation should support this metaverse evolution also.
Absolutely, and blockchain is even going to enable whole new forms of governance too, right? To just bring the legal side into it, just because, like, you can have what's called a distributed autonomous organization, or a DAO, which is a way to have people own a token in an organization that gives them voting rights, the ability to elect people who are in charge, and you can apply that to everything from a game to a gaming group, a guild, for example, a crypto project. You could, in theory, even apply it to our society in terms of towns, cities, governments, et cetera. So it's a really interesting way to think about it. And I agree with you, though, like the laws should follow the innovation, and certainly need to keep an eye on abuses and power and all these things that could be harmful. But right now we're at the innovation phase. We really have to allow people to create this stuff around the technology.
Yeah. Okay, so my final question is specifically for the Korean creators. Actually, I would like to explain a little bit about what the situation in South Korea. Actually, just in South Korea is a very special place. For example, the South Korea is the only place actually Google is not the first search engine. We have a local search engine like a neighbor, and then they are more popular than Google. And then also you may recently, I'm not sure about where you have seen the Netflix movie Squid Game.
Squid Game.
Yeah,
I'm aware of it.
Korean culture. Yeah, I'm thinking about some with my LinkedIn connection about to have a look at it, and then I'd like to have opportunity to join and then to explain it, because I did that kind of game in my child age. And so I pretty much familiar with all the games appeared in the Squid Game. And then you know about the BTS, right? So we have a very culturally very strong, and then also we have a local culture is also very strong, and the local community is very strong. So in that kind of the situation, and also in the global wise, especially the game, that actually the big platform company actually we not take all stuff, right? Because most of our audience will be like individual creators, they're doing their own business. So in that aspect of the situation in South Korea, do you have any specific suggestion to Korean creators for them to have opportunity in the global market? And then also what they should prepare for that in the global metaverse market leadership?
Yeah, so the metaverse has a left brain and a right brain aspect to it, like a creative and then also a highly analytical. So it's all there. I really want to ask people to think about going really deep on one of those. So of course, if you can bring it together, you're that rare person who does it all. Wonderful. But I think just trying to straddle and do a little bit of stuff in between is actually going to be the hard part. Whereas the really creative brain, the one that gets great at art, storytelling, branding, world building, the experiential qualities, the human qualities of this, I think is going to be very, very important in the metaverse. And people should really be encouraged by this, because there's going to be more jobs, for example, for artwork than there has ever been before, just because of this. At the opposite extreme, if you want to be technical or scientific about the metaverse, go really deep, because the challenges in the metaverse are not going to be just sort of like coding, scripting. A lot of the in-between coding is going to go away and be replaced by no-code and low-code platforms, right? So one area of engineering is be part of making the no-code and low-code platform. We're talking about a metaverse where there's going to be billions of people, and we're going to have digital twins of everything in the world in it, right? Maybe we'll get the stars in there too. Like, it's going to be all this onslaught of information. So dealing with huge information volume, huge scale, is a real domain that continues to need a lot of work.
Yeah. I think that this is my final comment. I would like to say about what I'm doing now. Actually, I come up with the idea that in the future, that the business will be all in metaverse. So actually, what I'm doing is doing some business. There is a business process, right, for sales or the developing product, manufacturing, supply chain, and then they can be digitalized, and then they can make a digital twin. And then why not? The total company business process can be metaverse, right? And then you can join as your digital twin, right? Your human beings metaverse can join, and then what will happen? Actually, you will sit in your home, but still you can do your business, right? The whole business will be in the metaverse, and then I try to understand how I can actually make it happen. And recently I come up with the idea, and then I'm now like writing a pattern about that, and then try to make some prototype model. So I'm going to do soon. I'm announce that I have a very fantastic idea, and then I can make a whole business metaverse. So it can be another opportunity. So I'm really excited that I can do this as just integrating the current state of the technology. So this is what I'm doing. I'm going to let other people know about it. Okay, so we all done everything to talk about in today's session, and I hope that our talk and presentation and insight and then suggestion will useful and helpful to the Korean creators. But we hope that our thought and then our like insight and suggestion will reach to the audience. Okay, thank you to participate this session.
네, 두 분 대담 듣다 보니까 정말 40분이 금방 지나갔습니다. 왠지 두 분이 티키타카가 심상치 않다고 했는데 두 분이 친구분이라고 그러더라고요. 네, 정말 흥미로운 아이디어가 많았죠. 메타버스는 우리가 살고 있는 세상이 디지털 트윈으로 확장되는 과정이다. 미래의 모든 비즈니스는 메타버스에서 이뤄질 거라는 과감한 전망까지 내놓으셨는데요. 메타버스 문턱이 더 낮아질 거고 더 가까이 더 쉽게 우리가 메타버스의 세상에 진입하게 될 거라는 전망, 조금 두려우면서도 가슴이 뛰는 이야기였던 것 같습니다.